Okay, I'm just going to say a few things. I'm Scott Cloutier. If you don't know me, I've had the pleasure of being Erica's advisor on this journey. About 5 years ago, Erica reached out to do a master's at School of Sustainability and Zero Waste, and we had a conversation, and it quickly shifted to other things, as you'll see in Erica's presentation today. But I just want to take a moment to honor what Erica is doing within the School of Sustainability and just her journey throughout this process. It's been a journey that's been challenging at times. It's been a journey that's been very beautiful at times. She holds a very important space in the field of sustainability science and research. And she's been successful in that space, publishing nine different publications in various outlets. And she's also been very successful in bringing in alternative modes of learning into the classroom with somatic movement, and different ideas around those concepts. And so I just want to honor today for Erica. This is a big day, and it's a stressful day for a PhD student, but it's also a celebration of all the work she's done, and it's very obvious she has a large community here supporting her. So thank you everyone for being here. And Erica, I will let you take it away. Oh, and one little thing about process, we will just have Erica will share her performance and presentation with us, and then we'll have time for about 10 or 15 minutes of questions. And then we'll ask our audience to leave and just the committee members to stay. One thing I would like to do, this is the first time we've done this on Zoom, or I've done this on Zoom. Could everyone just type into the chat, just send Erica any kind of love you'd like to offer her, just to give her a great starting place. Something that inspired you about her, something that you just like to share with her before she takes this big step. It's in the chat.
I don't have there's no link in my Zoom for interpretation.
Oh,
I think she's typing to here.
You shouldn't have a problem, Mary Margaret. If you can hear us, you will be fine.
Okay.
Just giving a minute for the chat. Whenever you're ready, Erica. Thank you, friends.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's so beautiful to see so many beautiful messages, so much love. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. So welcome. For those who don't know me, I'm Erika Brechnoy. I'm a fourth-year PhD student in the School of Sustainability at ASU. I was born in Argentina and grew up in Bolivia, and I was raised around these two beautiful cultures. Where I come from, there is a lot of social connection, and I see here I have a lot of people from Bolivia and Argentina supporting me. And the connection that I saw with the people and with the land is one of the things that allow me to come and study sustainability. Today, I want to acknowledge my family. They have supported me so much during my life, and today in this presentation, I want to acknowledge my mom, my dad, my two brothers, my grandma, my relatives in Bolivia and in Argentina. Thank you, everyone. Before I start my oral presentation, I'm going to share with you a performance that I prepared. And the reason why I prepared this performance is that I am, in addition to being an academic, I'm also a dancer who advocates for the inclusion of the arts with the sciences. And I believe that the scientific community should learn to translate our research not only to the non-scientific community, but also translate it so that our research can tap into our emotional and spiritual dimensions. So that's my intention with this performance. The performance portrays my transformation from the inside out as a spirituality researcher, and it will take you through 3 stages: becoming aware of things I wasn't aware before: death, spiritual death, and rebirth. While you watch the performance, I invite you to open your mind and your heart to what you are seeing. It may tap into the emotional component of you. After we watch the performance, we are going to have a minute where you can write your impressions in the chat. And after that, I'm going to move into my oral presentation. So I want to ask you to please turn off your audio and your video. And I will do the same so that the video is well seen by everybody. please write your impressions in the chat. And after that, we'll be able to start. So you can write anything that you want in the chat if you have any impressions. If you want to comment on my shaved head, feel free to do it too. Okay, it seems that that was it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I really appreciate them. So now we are going to change the setting of the chat. You will only be able to message the hosts. If you have problems in English, feel free to message David Messer. If you have problems in Spanish, feel free to message Andrés Berejnoy. Si no me pueden escuchar, escríbanle a Andrés Berejnoy para que los ayude. ¿Sí? Okay, so I think we don't have any more messages. Thank you. Okay, so at the end, you can write more in the chat. But for now, so that I don't get distracted with the messages, we are switching the features of the messages. Okay. Let's share my PowerPoint. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm still Erika Berejnoy, and this is still my dissertation defense. The title of my dissertation is Sustainability is a Spiritual Journey. I'm going to be talking today about how I came to this topic. Then I'll talk about the 3 chapters of my dissertation. Chapter 1 is an extensive literature review of the 3 fields of my dissertation: sustainability, happiness, and spirituality. And it is also a theoretical framework. Chapter 2 is a pilot study of the framework from chapter 1. Chapter 3 is an autoethnography of my experiences researching spirituality. And I'm going to end with conclusions and recommendations. And after that, we are going to have questions and answers. How did I come to my topic? I came to the School of Sustainability 4 years ago as a zero waste researcher. And the reason why I wanted to research zero waste was from my experiences growing up in Bolivia. There was little sustainability education, and often the land was used as a landfill. And with my research, I wanted to create a visible impact in the world. As I started researching this topic, I found that we cannot have a zero waste world without a transformation from the inside out, a transformation from our values. During this time, I was also learning that sustainability science and pedagogy focus predominantly on external interventions to humans, like carbon sequestration.
Factores externos a nosotros, por ejemplo, energía renovable y secuestro de carbono. Y no coloca mucho énfasis.
Was very important. External interventions are also very important, and we need to have both. So I felt drawn toward this inner component, and I changed my topic many times to come to where I am today. I went from zero waste to food systems, to happiness, to inner sustainability, and eventually to spirituality in the summer of 2018, thanks to a deep depression I experienced, which allowed me to reconsider my life, my values, and what type of sustainability model I wanted to be in the world. During this time, like Scott mentioned, I collaborated with professors, mentors, and colleagues on several research publications, and I also published my first book, all of which helped me to have a deeper understanding of my research topic. Dissertation chapters. I led the 3 chapters of my dissertation, and I had collaborators for chapters 1 and 2. Chapter 1 was published in 2019 as a book chapter. Chapter 2 is out for publication, and chapter 3 is not published, and I have no plans for publishing it, at least in the near future. Chapter 1. This is the literature review and theoretical framework. Spirituality, the missing link of sustainability and happiness as a framework for holistic development. The guiding questions were, what is the connection between spirituality, sustainability, and happiness? And how does spirituality promote sustainable behavior and happiness? Let me start with a few definitions. The standard definition of sustainability acknowledges the temporal dimension, meaning that we ensure that we have resources today and also future generations have access to resources. The definition I'm using, in addition to acknowledging the temporal dimension, acknowledges the spatial dimension, meaning that everyone on the planet today deserves to have access to resources. It's common for Western countries like the US to forget that today there are a lot of people in other parts of the world who don't have access to resources. And while working for sustainability, we need to ensure that people live happily as well. Happiness, also known as subjective well-being, is a combined effect of pleasure and meaning. Some authors refer to this type of happiness as spiritual happiness because we experience it when we are in full connection with our whole being, others, and nature. Burns suggests that we have 4 dimensions of ourselves. That is the physical dimension, mental dimension, emotional dimension, and spiritual dimension. So when I say that we are in full connection with our whole being, I refer to being in connection with these 4 selves. We started the chapter with a comprehensive review of the connection between happiness and sustainability. This is a greatly understudied field which deserves more attention. I found evidence suggesting that happy people are more likely to behave in sustainable ways. I also found evidence suggesting that when people behave in sustainable ways, they are more likely to feel happier after performing the behavior. And I saw that happiness and sustainability, they are both good for us. So I had the question of why people not act sustainably all the time and feel happy. The answer was spiritual underdevelopment. The literature suggested that when we are spiritually underdeveloped, we are more likely to feel unhappier and behave unsustainably. And I'm going to define spirituality so you understand what I mean by spiritual underdevelopment. First of all, I want to acknowledge that there are many forms of spiritual practices. We have religious practices, we have New Age spirituality, and while I'm not referring to any one in particular, I'm referring to the experience of all spiritual practices. In this dissertation, I define spirituality as a process of inner transformation, a transformation from self-centeredness to selflessness, from greed to generosity, from fear to courage, from disharmony to harmony within the self, from fear to love, and from I to we. The literature suggested that we experience several common traits when we go through a process of spiritual growth, including mindfulness, being mindful of our states and feelings without judgment, being aware of how our actions affect the world around us, having compassion for ourselves and for others, being connected with ourselves, with others, and with nature, and having love. By love, I mean being able to see yourself in the other, having the ability to have empathy, to appreciate life. So when I say spiritual underdevelopment, I mean little or no development in these traits. And that brings me to the theoretical framework for holistic development, which can be applied to people, to each individual, and to communities. I have mentioned that happiness and sustainability are interrelated and that this is a new field of study. My focus in this dissertation is spiritual growth, which is even a newer field of study. So what I'm doing in this dissertation is venturing into unexplored territory with the hope that more people will consider researching spirituality. What I suggest in this dissertation is that spiritual growth directly impacts happiness and sustainability. I want to acknowledge that spiritual growth is a lifelong process. Spirituality is not a destination, but an experience that will happen throughout our lives. The research suggested that to have a process of spiritual growth, we need to work on connection. We feel disconnected with ourselves, with others, and natures. So that's what we need to do, work on closing the gap. In the framework, I have measures to overcome inner disconnection and outer disconnection. Let me start with inner disconnection on the left. Inner disconnection refers to the disconnection we feel from our four selves, the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual selves. Some measures that we can do to close this disconnection include brain-heart coherence, research by the HeartMath Institute, meditation and mindfulness practices, and having a gratitude practice. On the right, we have measures to overcome outer disconnection. By outer disconnection, I mean disconnection we feel from others and from nature. And this is more common in the West. Some measures that we can engage in include holding discussions in the community to identify the root cause of unhappiness and unsustainability, and measures to overcome the disconnection we feel. Providing more opportunities to connect and interact with nature. We can reintroduce natural streams into the community. We can become part of CSAs, community shared agriculture. Identifying income-generating opportunities which promote and do not conflict with outer and inner connectedness. As we work on toward connectedness, it's important that we also promote infrastructure, policies, and education for sustainability. I want you to keep in mind this framework because the remainder of this presentation will be based on this framework. Chapter 2, Cultivating Spiritual Well-Being for Sustainability, a pilot study. The guiding question was, what effect do contemplative practices have on happiness, traits of spiritual well-being, and sustainable behavior? Contemplative practices include meditation, yoga, mindfulness, the measures that I mentioned in the previous slide for inner connectedness. Spiritual well-being refers to the ability to maintain spiritual growth. In other words, it is feeding our spiritual needs in the same way that we feed our physical needs. This is where we tested the framework that I shared in the previous slide in a sustainability classroom. And I did it in a sustainability classroom because students already have the education on sustainability. The research suggested that contemplative practices are beneficial for students, so I knew coming into the study that we would find some benefits. And what did I exactly do? We had participants coming from two groups. The experimental intervention, where we tested contemplative practices, came from the class Cultivating Inner Sustainability, and we had 7 participants. Our control group came from undergraduate students and graduate students. The undergraduates came from the class Sustainable World, and we had TAs who invited the students to participate, and those who chose to participate sign up online. The graduate students came from an email we sent to all grad students in the program, and the reason we sent an email was that there isn't a common class that all grad students are taking at the same time. Procedure. We had a volunteer who explained the purpose of the study, while the instructor, who was me, left the class to give some privacy to students. The students in the experimental class signed consent forms, and I didn't have access to them until the end of the semester. Students in both groups, experimental and control, completed online assessments at 3 points. Week 1, first week of the semester, week 15, last week of class, and week 25. 2 months after the semester ended. The experimental intervention was a special class. I created the format with the intention of testing the framework from chapter 1. The class offered a safe space where students could open up and explore their inner sustainability. And it was also a space for co-creation. Everybody could come up with activities for the day. Each class was composed of a class discussion where we talked about our inner process, inner growth, a contemplative practice, and a personal intention for the upcoming week. By personal intention, I mean something that students chose to work in their cultivation of their inner sustainability during that week. And at the end of each class, I assigned them reflection questions that related to the class discussion. They answered these questions in the form of journaling. We had qualitative and quantitative assessment tools. In the qualitative assessment tools, we had open-ended questionnaires asking students about their understanding of spirituality, sustainable behavior, and happiness, their experience with contemplative practices in the class, and their personal intention for the class. While I'm a qualitative researcher by training, I wanted to incorporate a quantitative component to enhance the findings of the study, and for that, I collaborated with a statistician. The quantitative component asked questions about self-compassion, happiness, and sustainable behavior. Data analysis. For the qualitative part, I did holistic coding, axial coding, and qualitative content analysis. Basically, I looked at the answers of the students and analyzed what themes emerged from those answers. For the quantitative component, we analyzed the change across time in our 3 time points, and we also looked to see if the students in the experimental group changed more than students in the control group on our 3 measures: self-compassion, happiness, and sustainable behavior. Qualitative results. They showed that students experienced peace, connectedness within, relaxation, and a safe space in the class. Students developed and/or deepened spiritual traits of patience, present moment awareness, compassion, and love. Students also developed a systems thinking mentality and an awareness of their interconnectedness with other beings. These 2 are important sustainability competencies. For those who are unfamiliar with the School of Sustainability, when students come to their programs, they are expected to become competent in these 5 competencies you see on the screen by the time they finish their programs. The students in the experimental class became competent in these 2 competencies, highlighted in blue, by means of group discussions, contemplative practices, and journaling. We didn't use any literature in the class. The final qualitative result showed that the effect of the class on a student's sustainable behavior remained above baseline for 4 students, which was 67% of the class after the class ended. And 50% of the class continued to engage in contemplative practices. Our quantitative results showed that students increased happiness and self-compassion, and there wasn't a significant change in sustainable behavior. The latter is something that we expected because it takes a long time to change behaviors, and a class of 15 weeks wouldn't do much. I hypothesize that if we had run the class for longer, probably we would have seen a more significant change in their behavior. Limitations. We had a small sample size due to the nature of the class. Not everyone is interested in cultivating inner sustainability. We also had students who dropped out of the study, and we had students taking the class, but not participating in the study. So actually, we had more than 7 students in the class. There was selection bias. The students who signed up in the study were already interested in cultivation of inner sustainability. We had time constraints. We could only run the study for 1 semester, and we didn't integrate academic literature. This one was an intention for the class. I wanted to see how, without the use of academic literature, how contemplative practices would affect students. If future studies are done, maybe you may want to incorporate academic literature, and perhaps we may see a bigger change in sustainable behavior. Implications of findings. Spiritual traits are necessary components to cultivate competencies that lead to sustainable behavior and long-lasting solutions. Look at the diagram on the right. Spiritual traits are at the core of what we do. When we integrate the spiritual component with the competencies, which is the intellectual part of our being, we'll have stronger sustainability behaviors and solutions, which is the outer ring in blue and in green. The second implication is that educational institutions should consider integrating contemplative practices into their curriculum to go hand in hand with traditional academic curricula. Sustainability pedagogy emphasizes intellectual content and learning. However, we cannot expect that real change will happen from the inside out without allowing emotional conversations to take place. We want to create well-rounded sustainability advocates. And we will do that if we integrate all the aspects of ourselves, not just the intellectual component. Okay, we are moving into a more personal and emotional space, unlike the first two chapters that were more intellectual. Let me drink some water first. Before I proceed, I want to invite you to take 3 deep breaths with me so that we are all together, we feel our bodies more, and we feel more connected. I'll count the first breath, and then you do the other 2 on your own. Breathe. 1. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 3 is titled Dancing Through the Inner Dimension of Sustainability and Autoethnography. My guiding question was, in what ways did my research on spirituality, sustainability, and happiness affect my personal life? For those studying spirituality or those interested in the field, you probably know or may want to know that it's impossible to research spirituality and not go through a process of a spiritual transformation yourself. I was deeply aware that I changed inside, and I wanted to integrate that transformation with this research. I chose the method of autoethnography, which is a qualitative research method, because it allows researchers to draw on their own experiences to understand a particular phenomenon or culture. My phenomenon was spiritual growth. Throughout the duration of my program, I journaled, and I used all that data from August 2016 to July 2020 to write this chapter. The slides that come are the result of my analysis from this data. My personal transformation was divided in 3 stages, which you saw in the performance. I went through a period of becoming aware of things I wasn't aware before: death, spiritual death, and rebirth. My first stage is becoming aware. When I came to the school, I was a homework machine. I knew how to do homework. I knew how to be productive. I knew how to get things ready, but I didn't know how to quiet my mind, how to find peace, how to self-reflect. I was introduced to meditation in my first semester as a tool that allows you to quiet your mind, find peace, and make better decisions in life. But all I found was total chaos in my mind. I was becoming aware of the noisy mind that I had. My mind never stopped talking. And this is a common phenomenon for people who are introduced to meditation. We become aware of the noise in our minds, and that's a good thing. I was also becoming aware of masks or identities that people choose to wear or to show to people. I used to wear the intellectual mask because I wanted people to respect me, and I wanted them to see that I was smart, and I would do it while disregarding my personal sustainability and well-being. I was aware that the intellectual mask was my ego, and I was committed to removing the masks that I had to reconnect with this deeper part of myself. I was also becoming aware of the disconnection I felt from my roots. I was born in Argentina, grew up in Bolivia, went to college in Kentucky, did grad school in Arizona. I've been all over the place. And in doing so, I didn't feel connected anywhere. And I wanted to find more connection. During this period, I removed masks. I did a lot of self-reflection, which tapped into painful parts of myself. And I did it all by myself. I didn't share this process with other people, which hurt me. And what happened next is similar to what happens to a balloon that you fill in with air. You fill it with more air, and more air, until there is a point where there is no more space for air and the balloon explodes. I couldn't put in anything more. There was so much pain that I collapsed, and that became my death. I want to acknowledge that death is not just physical. We go through cycles of death and rebirth every day. And the death that I'm talking about in this dissertation is my spiritual death. This was the darkest period of my life where I fought the depression, I fought the panic attacks, I fought the anxiety. I didn't want people to know that I wasn't okay. I still kept clinging onto my ego, my intellectual mask, my sense of perfectionism, until one day I realized that in order to let new life take place, it's important to let the old ways of being die. When we say goodbye to what is no longer useful in the process of growth, there is a space for new beginnings. Like you saw in the performance video, there was a point where I stopped fighting. There was a moment where I decided to surrender to the process, to the pain. And I also decided to open up to my family with my inner process. And magically, or not magically, but in the process of surrendering, the struggle ended. And that led me to my rebirth. My rebirth was my process of healing, and it was marked by a cold night in June in 2018, when I was back home in Bolivia. I was desperate to get better. The academic semester was starting soon, and I wasn't okay. I couldn't sustain myself, and I looked for all possible ways to heal until I remembered that meditation was good for depression. I wasn't a big meditator until that day, and I decided to do a loving kindness meditation I had learned in one of my classes. Loving kindness meditation is a tool that helps you to create positive feelings inside of you in a way that outweighs self-judgment that people often feel and negative feelings toward the self. I repeated the following phrase to myself, and I want to invite you to repeat it with me 3 times. Feel free to close your eyes and to feel your heart. May I be loved. May I be well. May I be safe and happy. May I be loved. May I be well. May I be safe and happy. May I be loved. May I be well. May I be safe and happy. I went to bed, tucked myself under the blankets, and decided to sleep. 10 minutes after doing that, I had a beautiful experience, which some authors refer to as mystical experience, where you feel in connection with life. And I felt suddenly deeply connected with everything, with life, with the universe.
En mucho tiempo. Me sentí profundamente amado.
And I felt deeply loved. And that was the beginning of my healing journey, which wasn't easy. I had many times where there was a lot of darkness back in me. During this period, I learned to integrate the 4 dimensions of myself, the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual selves. I also let learned to let go of the homework machine I had been. And in doing so, I allowed myself to create balance. There was more balance in me. I also became more vulnerable with other people. And in doing so, I felt more connected with my roots and I felt happier. Coming full circle. One day last year, I was doing a morning meditation and I thought of the negative energy that I had inside of me. I asked the energy to go away. And then in a split second, I thought, wait a second, where will this energy go? Will it go to my neighbor's backyard? Will it go to the street? I was realizing that waste starts inside of us with the thoughts that we create. And I didn't want to create more waste in the world, whether it's physical or spiritual. I realized that day that only when we all act with mindfulness and have a deeper respect for life, we'll be able to have real sustainable societies. The answer to what needs to be done is have a change of values. We cannot have a sustainable society without a change of values. We need to heal our lives and start appreciating life more. I'm going to end the autoethnography with a few lessons learned during my PhD journey. Sustainability literally means the ability to sustain, according to the dictionary. I cannot sustain the world or my community if I'm unable to sustain my inner peace and happiness. Self-healing of the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual selves is important. When we learn to become balanced individuals, we are going to become better teachers, better friends, better family members, better people. The second lesson is that true sustainability is an act of love. By act of love, I mean the ability to see yourself in the other, the ability to have empathy and appreciate life more. It takes courage to look beyond the status quo and work, but really work, for the well-being of everyone, not just a few. Sustainability work requires that we step out of our comfort zones and look inside to see if there is anything that prevents or goes against sustainability. And it takes even more courage to take action and improve those areas of your life. That brings me to the conclusion of this dissertation. 1, there is great potential to bridge spirituality and sustainability to humanely address challenges to sustainability. 2, Chapter 2 of this dissertation
Capítulo 2 de esta disertación demuestra
students to develop inner traits necessary for sustainable behavior, like recycling or being more holistic with our behaviors, thinking about others, and a deeper understanding of sustainability. 3, my autoethnography demonstrated that integrating spiritual well-being and the intellect can lead to a powerful spiritual transformation and growth that benefits everyone. I want to end with my call to action for you. I encourage you to find ways to connect at a deeper level with yourself, other people, and nature. For the academics in the room interested in a spirituality approach, I encourage you to start your classes with a 5-minute meditation. You can also read my dissertation to get ideas of how to integrate this approach. Before I end, there are a lot of people and groups that I want to acknowledge. I don't have the time to do that with everyone. They are acknowledged in my dissertation, but I want to acknowledge these people because they helped me to get this dissertation ready and this presentation today. First, I want to really thank a big thank you to my family and to my extended family and to the SOS community. Thank you for trusting me, for supporting me throughout the years. Thank you to my committee members. All of you are awesome people. Thank you, Scott, Rohanna, Mary Margaret, and Robin. Thank you for your love, your teachings. I'm always going to take a little bit of your wisdom with me. Thank you to my beloved husband, David. You are my rock, my right hand, my spiritual teacher. This dissertation would definitely not be the same without you in my life. Thank you to the people who helped me with the performance aspect. Thank you, Rachel, for introducing me to performance interventions and for giving me your thoughtful feedback on the performance that I showed today. Also, thank you to Sydney and to Mundil for taking their time to watch my performance and giving me feedback. Also, thank you to the Sustainability and Happiness Lab, Natalia, Sarah, and Sarah. Thank you for supporting me and being with me throughout all the process of my dissertation. Thank you to my dad, Eugenio, for doing the performance, for editing the video. Also, I don't have it here written. Thank you to my mom, Patricia, for giving me her thoughtful feedback and a lot of love to have the presentation and the performance completed. Thank you to my brother, Andres, for working on the logistics for the Spanish people. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And finally, thank you, Daniel, my brother, Daniel Berejnoy, representing Bondas International, for providing the Spanish interpretation today. Without you, the Spanish community wouldn't have been able to understand what I'm saying. So thank you for being here. With that, I'm going to end and thank you. We can switch open the chat for everyone. The chat is open. Scott, do you want to lead or do you want me to?
Okay, friends, Erica, thank you so much. Let's just take a moment to feel into a question you think is important to ask, and we'll take questions till about 3:15 and then we'll stop and we will say goodbye to our audience and then spend time with her, with the committee. So any love you want to give, and then if anyone has questions, Eric, do you want to host those by chat and choose those, or how would you like to do that?
People who have questions can write them in the chat, or if they want to ask them, they can raise their hands. You cannot unmute yourself, so you can go to the participants tab. You will see a few options: yes, no, go slower, go faster, and more. There are 3 dots, click on them, and there are hands. You can raise any of the hands and we'll unmute you. People in Spanish, feel free to also unmute your microphones and ask your questions. Thank you, Rachel. Bye. Okay, Matt, do you want to ask a question? I can unmute you. Or David, could you unmute Matt?
Hi.
Hey, Matt.
Hi, Sylvia is here also. Greetings from Northern Norway. Just beautiful presentation. I'm wondering, I noticed that you brought a lot of practice into the defense, sharing of the performance, breathing together, some of the mantra from the meditation. And I wonder, what is the importance for you of the practice being part and alongside of the academic experience of spirituality research?
Mm-hmm. The intention of my work is to encourage people and inspire people to reconnect with their spiritual dimension. I figured that most people won't remember what I present today, but they will remember the practice. We store information in our bodies, and when we move, we remember better. So that was the intention, to share a little bit of connection with people, and in doing so, encourage people to do this practice at home. We have a question from Evan. Andres, could you unmute that person? Or maybe, Andres, can you read the question to me? Your inner world. So the question is, after you resigned yourself to your inner world, how long did it take you to get to where you feel is a healthy place with your inner self? So after I went through the process of depression, it was really hard to, like I mentioned, healing doesn't happen overnight. It was about a year where I felt that I was where I wanted to be. So last year, a year ago, that's where I felt balanced. And now I feel the most balanced I think ever. Yeah. There is another question. How do you see the link between your personal journey and change in behavior? A big link in that is that as I went through this process of becoming aware, reintegrating all the aspects of myself, I became more compassionate toward myself. I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that how I define spirituality with it. There are 5 common traits: mindfulness, awareness, compassion, connection, and love. I wasn't very loving toward myself. I thought that I was good enough only if I had good grades and if I performed well in academia. So in the process of extending love to myself, in the process of being more compassionate with myself, I was able to hold space for other people. I created a container of compassion and love for myself. And when I did that, the result was that I was able to love people more. For example, in the class Cultivating Inner Sustainability, there is a lot of emotions emerging there. And if I hadn't felt balance in myself, there were times when people brought really painful aspects of their lives. And because I was balanced, I was able to create a space for them, to hold them without breaking down. So that was something really big, a really big change, that I didn't break down. I was balanced enough to help other people, to support other people in their journey. Another question is, what research topics would you next like to see come from your work? I'm really interested in spirituality, and I want to continue looking at it. I'm very interested in femininity, in feminism, and looking more at women, because in my process of growth, I also became more connected to my feminine side, which I didn't acknowledge much before. So I'm very interested in looking at that, spirituality and connection with women. Do you have recommendations for persuading people to look at sustainability more holistically? A lot of people see it as only as an outside thing. But from your presentation, it seems starting from within will yield better results on the outside. My recommendation is that if you are interested in being more balanced, that you start working on yourself. And by working on yourself, you will inspire other people. Something that I've learned is that we cannot force anyone to do things that they don't want to do. Going through a process of inner transformation requires intention, and it requires that people want to work on it. So if we work on ourselves, people will see the change and they will ask you, what do you do? What are you doing? I see you happier. So that is one thing, inspiring people by your own work. And the other is educational institutions. Like I mentioned in chapter 2, it will be really cool to see educational institutions, not just sustainability, but education in general, to incorporate a more spiritual dimension, to welcome emotional conversations. When students learn contemplative practices or just opening up with each other, they will practice it. I had many students in the class Cultivating Inner Sustainability who had never they had heard of contemplative practices, but they didn't know how to meditate, or they didn't know how to engage in them. So many of them thanked me for opening a space of learning how to cultivate their inner selves. Thank you, Ivan. Other questions? Maybe Andres, David, you can copy and paste questions in the chat. I noticed that in your autoethnography slides, you shared academic references. Could explain the connection between the academic literature and your journey. So what I did in my autoethnography was, I had my own experience, and I also wanted to see if the literature said anything about my experience, if what I was experiencing was something that people had written about. Let me remember what slides. So we had the mystical experience. There is literature written on mystical experiences. That's not something that I have made up. The process of becoming aware and removing masks, there is also literature on that. I'm forgetting the name of the psychologist. The one of the 7, the basic needs, what's his name? He has written about it. Maslow, thank you, David. Maslow has written about it with other words. The meditation being, having a chatty mind, it's something that people have written about in the literature. So the use of the literature was intended to strengthen my findings from the analysis. Let's see, there is another question. You mentioned that research on spirituality led to spiritual transformation. Could you share any challenges one can experience when conducting such extensive research on spirituality? Anything to be mindful about? And after this question, we are going to unmute Max, please. Yes, the literature says, and spiritual guides also say, that spiritual growth is good, and it is good, but if you are not balanced, you may experience bad things, like what happened to me. I was so focused on my intellectual component that I disregarded the other areas of my life. So I was forced, my body forced me, my being forced me to get depressed, to really reconsider my life. So you may feel more anxiety, you may feel panic attacks. I mean, each person has their own experience. So the process of spiritual growth is not all beautiful. At the end, you become more balanced. You learn to accept what happens to you with love and compassion. But in the process, you will have ups and downs like anything in life. David, could you unmute Max, please?
Yeah. Nice to see you. First of all, thanks for the nice presentation, for the chance to participate all the way from Vienna. I noticed some of your literature due to my own research from this field of connectedness with nature, and I was wondering if either with the experiment or the study with your students or in your autoethnography, did you come up with any changes in how you experience nature also through this getting more into your spiritual side, or at any point of the process? What's your take on this, basically on this relation between spirituality and connectedness, not just with your deep self, but also with nature?
Mm-hmm. Before my transformation, I love being outside, but I didn't feel like I connected with nature at a being to being level. With the classes that we had classes outside where we lay down around trees, we felt the grass, we walked barefoot. And with the conversations that emerged from the class, the students were wonderful, very awakened people. I started to be more intentional with my connection to nature. Now I like to go outside and think, does this tree feel? How am I taking enough care of the plants that I have around me? So before I would just see nature is beautiful, but now I feel it. I'm more intentional. So it's a different experience. It's like there is like a click inside. I treat nature like I would treat animals or people. Nature is alive. So that is a really big change in how I see my connection to nature. Let's see other questions. Thank you, Max, for the question. What research topic? Oh, I answered that question. What other questions do we have? We have 3 minutes left. Andres or David, could you? Oh, Lizette asks, there are many ways to meditate. Which ways would you recommend for people who are beginning with this technique? When I started meditating, I didn't like it. It was very uncomfortable. And this will also connect to the previous question. I used to have panic attacks when meditating because I felt my breathing and my heartbeats too deeply. Highly sensitive people may experience this at a heightened level. So for people who are beginnings in meditation, I would encourage you to do a guided meditation. If you are with other people, hold hands with other people, or feel your heart. Hold your heart so you feel your hands. That is from my personal experience. I started with guided meditations. It was hard to meditate by myself. But when I started to get in the habit of meditation, and this is something that I took from a friend, Danielle Chipman, she recommended that I meditate for 1 minute, and then each day I will add 1 minute to my meditation, my quiet meditation. So now I would meditate 20 minutes a day, but I started with 1 minute. What other questions do we have? Where do you see spirituality in business world? It's a big component of the business world and in everything that we do. If we are detached from our spiritual dimension, we may be greedy, we may not have sustainable practices. So the more aware, the more mindful we are, the more compassionate we are going to have better business practices. We are going to choose materials that are biodegradable, that are sustainable, over focusing on profit. So spirituality is a big component of the business world. Any final question? Let's see. I know there are many questions and I cannot see them all. What other? Any final question? Okay. Okay, I think I have answered all of the questions. We are out of time now. It's 1:15. So I want to thank everyone for your questions. Thank you for being here. I love to see the community supporting me.